Good morning everybody and welcome back to Hyrule, where today we're going back into the brick-built minifigure scale Lego Hyrule Castle build that we've been working on as we start the second layer. If you remember last time we finished up the front gatehouse and we'll be returning there later in this video to make a couple of tweaks to that part of the model, but today I'm excited to introduce a brand new section, something that has been much anticipated in this series, and that is the library. We actually started this model by working on the docks, and it's really fulfilling to be able to link it up with the library which it directly connects to. And I have all of those details here today, even if the room is not finished. Now, for those of you who don't remember, the library sits around the back of the castle, and it's a really tricky build to integrate here because not only does it have to have an interior, but it curves around about, maybe 30 degrees, has a very interesting curved shape, and beyond all of that, it also connects to the outside and further inside sections in multiple sections. In fact, when it pops out of the rock, you're actually seeing the library's second floor, meaning that it had to be inset beneath the ground, yet still visible, have a doorway that works, and then also be in the right position to line up with the east passage, which, by the way, thank you all for suggesting that the talus should be asymmetrical. That has been implemented here, and you can see the little rock crystal on the top, and then some more variation on the arms and hands, and I think that looks much better. But as I mentioned, the library has to connect to this east passage, but we've also prepared this white corridor here at the other end, and don't worry, I will show you the actual library up close, but this white corridor which connects to an area above where you can go outside, and that had to be in the right position so that this wouldn't cause problems later down the line. But let's talk about the main event. You've been seeing pictures of it on your screen, but as I've mentioned, this library is curved in three major sections in order to replicate what we see in game. It's a sort of highly arched structure and has sort of a tiled floor, and I knew that comparatively compared to other floors throughout the castle, this was one that absolutely had to be represented accurately, and that meant only one technique, which is using jumper offsets to place 2x2 tiles in a diagonal pattern to create a white and grey effect. Now we can argue and debate the actual colours of these all day long, but white and grey and light grey even felt the most suitable to me, not only because I think it matches the colour in game, but also we're imagining this as a pre-calamity castle, which is why you see none of the damage that the castle and the library in particular sustains in Breath of the Wild. This makes the colours a lot brighter and a lot more poppy, which I'm particularly pleased with. Obviously you'll notice that one of the walls is missing. That has been, one, done deliberately to make this rendering process easier, and two, because I have not built it yet, because believe it or not, this is a really high time intensive room, just because of course that floor is layered, working out the angle, and you can see it's not perfect. If we look at the two joins, you can see that I've had to use some irregular tiles, so it looks like the sort of tiling work has fallen apart, but I've tried to pick the best size and colour for each of those joins in order to make the transition as smooth as possible. Beyond that, of course, sorting out the angling that ripples through into all of the walls, positioning it, as I mentioned already, with the terrain outside, and then of course just doing all the normal detailing. This is perhaps my favourite render here because it just shows you it straight on and all the different textures. Once again, as we talked about with the gatehouse last time, we're using both a little bit of dark bluish grey mixed into the light bluish grey to accent certain details or make certain items stand out, and that can be seen on these major columns. While the library actually has multiple columns when you're working at a Lego scale, especially a minifigure scale environment, this had to be scaled down to keep the essence, and I think you can see that when you stand on the balconies and look around this curved shape here, that it does look just like the library in game, while only having 3 pillars instead of maybe 5 or 6, I don't remember. There are of course all bookcases here, as well as some of the other details that I have, various different sort of candle holders, book displays, which I actually really love. I particularly love the ones up on the balcony, which use minifigure poser pieces, and this of course is where you find these side quest recipes, so you'd find a book here, but there's also these ones down below, and I'm pretty sure I'll add more of these as I flesh out the other side, but yeah, these little study desks are great. And then of course underneath all the arches is where the main bookcases are, and they're nice and bright and colourful. I'm particularly proud of the alphabeting that we've done on the top. One of the Easter eggs in the game is that these Hylian letters sort of show the classification of books in the library, so it's like A to C, C to D, and so on, and it goes through. And we've got those here represented using the 1x2 pill tiles, and then they're on some new golden pieces, many thanks to Monkey Kid, and some golden leaves to introduce those. And I really love this because it just makes it more ornate and more recognisable. Before we move around to the side though, of course there are two other things on this wall. We have the grey bookcase down below. This has been recreated sort of as best as I could without the use of stickers, so we're using a snot technique to get rail plates on its side. We've also got grey sausages to form sort of the arch shape, and I hope that's recognisable as the magnesable bookcase. Magnesable? That's not a word, but the book that you can move with magnesis. And obviously this can be easily removed to access a little really hard to see dark passageway. And this dark passageway does indeed connect all the way through to the docks, which I don't have an amazing render of, but you can see if I dig up this slot of grass outside that it's completely buried under there, and it connects all the way around to the docks, which this model of course sits on top of. And if you're not familiar with that, we'll be doing a castle sort of recap and tour as the next major video in this series, just to give you guys some brand new renders of what it looks like all together, and that will be next month. But back to the actual library itself, I mentioned there was one other section that is, of course, the door to the outside here. I'm not going to take you outside now, but that door does indeed connect with the outside area and is something we do see in game as well. But it was really important to me that all the passageways line up in this castle. As you know, it's sort of pseudo-figure scale. But moving up to the upper balcony, you also notice this little cupcake here. This is of course referencing the monster cake, which is I think the Chancellor's favourite meal. It's either the Chancellor or some other royal person's favourite meal. And I was able to recreate that here using a lavender piece and another cupcake case. So that was great because it really fitted and was a nice little Easter egg, and it sits so perfectly on the corner of this balcony. I actually want to draw our attention to the roofing. While this building doesn't have a complete roof yet and probably never will have a fully decorated ceiling, I wanted to give the archway illusions where possible on the height, because obviously if this room was any shorter I would have done a ceiling for it because something's got to support the roof. It just so happens that it gets cropped off here, and then the Technic frame for the layer above will have any extra details which won't be done for some time yet. Instead what we get is this lovely sort of red lush arching with sort of the stonework in between, and that's been tried to be recreated here across the pillars and then going into the other layers. And actually I've had to sort of use a faux technique where the back of the blue roof for the outside is actually in dark red to just sort of continue that illusion for the underlayer, despite there being none of the shaping that you actually see in game, although that would have been practically impossible with all of what this model is trying to cram in. Now there are other secret rooms inside the library, most notably of course is the connection to the East Passage, which is usually blocked by Malice in Breath of the Wild and is sealed off in Tears of the Kingdom. You can see that that is down here at one end with the staircase. I'm not going to talk about staircases now because that will play into the other end more importantly I think. But yeah, you've got this little sort of rockway cut away, and obviously this is still here in the pre-calamity times because they're sort of digging and excavating, so they've made a bit of a mess in their library. And we've actually got this coat of arms here at the bottom of the staircase here, just a simple soldier's one, not royal guards, and that continues up through a sort of 3-level staircase up until the end. And I love being able to poke the render camera through these archways. I think it's delightful and a lot of fun. Let's go down to the staircase at the other end because that is of course hiding another secret. We've got a longer bookcase here which has a partially removable section, again sort of referencing the magnesis bookcase that we saw earlier, but instead of using the same design again I decided to make it a big long bookcase. Other unique design language here is the use of the Harry Potter wands in gold to create some golden finials and design language on this bookcase just to make it seem a little bit more ornate. But as you'd expect, you can remove this section here which reveals access to the King's study, which is buried underneath and has a couple more accurate details in it, from of course the sort of lectern where he can do and write his diary to an open book on the table. There's some crates full of skulls for all of his research and some pictures on the wall as well with no prints cut now, and then a Royal Guard banner. Perhaps we'll one day use the Mario Kart set banners that are going to come in the Bowser Castle set later this summer. Who knows? We'll see how useful those are when I get my hands on them. And as I mentioned, continuing up this staircase is how you get to the second floor. So you've got two sides that sort of join in the middle on the landing, and this is actually where there's a hidden treasure chest in Tears of the Kingdom, but not here because it's buried underground. This is where you enter out into that white corridor I mentioned earlier, and where you can sort of climb your way out to that sort of rocky place, actually where the shrine is in Tears of the Kingdom, but to the outside of the castle. And we'll deal with that corridor later. I've just done a sort of rough scaled version to work out where the passageway is going, and this is actually a rubble passageway, so it will have a dead end. Meaning we might be able to continue it on and add an extra new room down here at some point, which would be really exciting. However, I think we just leave it for now. And then of course from that entranceway the staircase continues upwards to the side and will eventually continue onto the other sort of railway like above ground section. And of course we will have the sort of mining shaft that leads to the Ganon chamber eventually as well, although I'm not quite sure how I'm going to implement that because I think I am probably away from where my Ganon chamber will end up going. So we'll have to see. That's going to be a problem for another day, I think. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the outside now then, and you can see that this is by no means a simple build either. As I mentioned, this entire plate is actually sort of halfway up because as I lay my plates, the base of the library sits at that level, so then we had to build up this faux rockwork that sort of encases the lower level, but also comes flat with this main door here that you can see in brown, which connects you to the second level of the library. This section will eventually have a castle wall in front of it, which unfortunately is actually going to hide up most of it, which is what this white outline here shows, and I'm a bit loath to do it really, but I will eventually. For now though, we get to enjoy this great view, and again, a lot of techniques have gone into here. Not only do we have this sort of inset archways, again using the dark bluish grey to recreate sort of the window slits and the extra details, but then these arches curve up to sort of this brick built sort of wedge, and then we've got the dark blue roof, which is sort of split into 3 segments just like the library, because remember, this is all on an angle again, and I've tried to cover up the gaps as best as possible. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good if I say so myself. And then we have these 2 sort of eaves here, which I really love. Again, it's these simple techniques sometimes, although this admittedly isn't very simple, that just sort of create a really nice effect. And I think the balance of the dark blue, the light bluish grey, and the dark bluish grey sort of feeds together really well, and reminds me of the front gate that we were talking about in previous weeks. Now, in order to fully encase the library, I actually had to do a lot more grass work, and there was actually this brand new section here with a waterfall that previously wasn't built, and this actually connects in right to the previous sections we've done above the docks. Unfortunately, I don't have those connection renders to show you today, as I'm saving those in fact for our next video, so you'll have to wait for the library to be placed. But trust me that this section is brand new. Again, a lot of rockwork, some very basic plant details, sort of a not very used area here, and eventually this will of course connect with that castle wall that I'm yet to build out here. But again, I'm loving how this looks. I like that the stream has a little bend to it. I was worried that this stuff would end up being too rigid, but nope, I think we're all good. And yeah, when we just start to add it to the rest of the model, the height just is getting extreme, and I'm sort of really relieved that the library fits in and is sort of validating my plan. I can actually start to see how all the interior rooms are going to connect, and where I am in the model, I'm maybe a month away from being able to plot out every interior room in the castle, which sounds like a crazy step forward. However, obviously we still have to design all of those, do all the rockwork around the outside, and do an entire another layer above all those interiors because of all the outside castle work that still has to be done. So we're a long way off, but it will be an amazing milestone to hit by the end of 2025, if at all possible. So yeah, really loving how this outside's coming together. I'm really proud of the facade and how it connects into all the rockwork. Again, it's hard to understate how long it takes just to trial and error and sort of make sure that it looks how I want it to, and what details get simplified and can I do better and so on. So a lot more goes into it than you guys get to see in the finished result. Let's just take one last look at the inside of that library before I show you a couple of the other features that I've touched up this time for you guys, based on your comments from last time of course. But yeah, just take a look at that. I love how this library turned out. It's one of the most enigmatic locations, I think, in the castle. It was super important to get right, and I think it would look amazing as a standalone model. I cannot wait to put the second wall on it and have it fully enclosed before too long as well. But I love the arches and then the bookcases and the little references, and that tiling floor really does go the extra mile as well. Okay, enough of that. I've already mentioned the talus, but yes, after much fan feedback, we did indeed change the talus to make it look just a little bit more regular. Here you can see it inserted into the east passage right beneath the library. And then a couple more changes actually round the front. I'd realised that a lot of the outside areas where we had the sparring ground and the tents with the cannons was a little flat, so I've gone through and added some grass tufts just to show. So obviously it would be very trampled because these are more used areas and there isn't any huge variation in the terrain, but just some more ground variations and some little tufts and some leaves around. You probably won't even notice the difference. Then the biggest one, and the one that hurts the most, actually takes us right back down to the castle bridge at the entrance. You'll notice I've got the doors open, and do you see that between there? I actually remember to add the main path. Now, no one actually pointed this out that this was missing last week, but the main path that goes up HYRULE Castle is so defined and well paved that it would have made sort of no sense for the grass to have completely overgrown it. So I ripped up the entire front hill, and I've actually started in adding this sort of the pattern here. And we're going with the same design we've seen everywhere else in all the hallways, which is just 1x2 grey tiles, 1x1s wherever, offset, and with a little border that's going to go up and wind the main path. So when I'm talking the main path, path, I'm only referring to the bit that goes through the 2 main gatehouses all the way up to the sanctum. It's very clearly paved in game. There are a couple of other smaller paths that will have the more rough and ready design. So like around the back of the castle, we had split up 1x1 tiles, and maybe we'll have a more of like a herringbone, like simpler, smaller design as well, or something that's a little more spaced out, more like cobbles. Either way, we're going to play around with it, but this design will follow up for the main path, and I'm pleased to finally have it done. And actually, if I give you a sneak peek, I'm now working on the path up to the first gatehouse. This will be our next progress update, although as I mentioned, next time we'll just be giving you guys a recap of where we are with the castle so far and hopefully capturing some really cool and new render angles. But yeah, I'm working my way up. I've laid the Technic frame, and since I did this render, I've actually continued the path all the way up to that first waterfall as well. So very excited to continue making progress on it. As I said, I hope that obviously not in the next video, but the video after, I will have all of the interior laid out as well. So I'm very pleased with how it's going. But anyway, that is going to do it for today's update. I managed to ramble my way through there, I think, and I hope you guys like the library and let me know what you think of it down below. I'm very curious to see if you guys enjoyed it at all. And of course, this castle is progressing all the time. I know the updates are coming few and far between, but we've got a lot going on and there's a lot to look forward to on the channel at the moment. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Put all your comments and thoughts down below and consider leaving us a little subscribe as well. And I will see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.